Today on Steelers Talk, we're going to be breaking down the latest juicy trade rumors surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers. First up, there is a quote-unquote report at the Pittsburgh Steelers called about a speedy wide receiver that could help bolster the Steelers offense, especially when throwing the ball down the field. Then the Steelers have been linked to a big-name running back. I'll let you know whether I think that's a realistic possibility. We'll finish up today's show with a starting NFL left tackle that has now been made available via trade that the Steelers could trade for to replace Broderick Jones if they want. Now, if and when the con artist strikes, all right, before the NFL trade deadline, which is in about a month here, make sure you guys are subscribed for our breaking news coverage. There's been a flurry of trades over the last few weeks in the National Football League. There was multiple this week. A trade for the Pittsburgh Steelers could happen at any moment, at least during the early parts of the week. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already for our extensive trade rumors, trade targets, and trade breaking news coverage right here on Steelers Talk. So apparently the Pittsburgh Steelers are still kind of shopping around to add potentially another big-name wide receiver or somebody else that can contribute to the passing game, as according to a report from Andrew Fillipponi, the Pittsburgh Steelers called the New Orleans Saints over the bye week regarding wide receiver Rashid Shaheed. This was the report from Fillipponi earlier today. It says, source. The Steelers reached out to the Saints during the bye week to take their temperature on wide receiver Rashid Shaheed, who will be a free agent at the end of the year. Big play wide receiver and return man. Trades are being made in the NFL left and right. Well, that final point is absolutely right. The trades are coming very, very rapidly at this point in the NFL schedule. Usually teams wait till the last minute to make trades. This year it seems like there's been couple more here, outside of a month to go to the trade deadline. But listen, man, I would be on board with bringing in Rashid Shaheed. And even though it is pony, we got to take it with a grain of salt. Obviously, this one is at least plausible because Shaheed can be a long-term contributor here in Pittsburgh. If you feel like you don't want to bring in Calvin Austin III on a long-term deal after this season, Shaheed is a little bit bigger than Calvin Austin III. He's 6 foot, 180 pounds. He's not a big receiver by any stretch of the imagination, but he does a lot of the same things that Calvin does as well, only in a slightly bigger frame. He is one of the best and premier deep threats in the NFL, one of the fastest players in the entire league, fantastic at tracking the ball in the air down the field. And he's had a lot of big play touchdowns throughout his time in New Orleans. And, he is on the final year of his current contract with New Orleans. And frankly, New Orleans is 1-4, and a couple more weeks go by and they lose a couple more games, they're going to be selling at the NFL trade deadline. That's just what it is, especially if they don't see Shaheed in their long-term plans. But you guys can take a look at what he's done so far this season. Not bad. 22 catches for 288 yards with 2 touchdowns. And he had a long last week versus the New York Giants of 87 yards. So if you lose Rashid Shaheed on an NFL football field, especially down the field, you can absolutely pay the price if you are a defense. And as we know, the Steelers love their vertical speedsters that can get open down the field. And then right now, if you convert that to a 17-game schedule, Shaheed is currently on pace for 75 catches, almost 1,000 yards rushing, receiving, I should say, and for 7 touchdowns. That's pretty darn good. And I think no Steelers fan on the planet would sneeze at that production from their quote-unquote number 2 wide receiver. So is he as big of a name as somebody like Chris Olave or Jakobi Meyers necessarily, or DJ Moore or Calvin Ridley? No, but he's certainly somebody that fits what the Steelers like in terms of being a speedster that gets open down the field. Now, personally, I would probably rather have Chris Olave, and I understand the concussion concerns with Olave, but I think the Steelers really need somebody that Aaron Rodgers can trust to get open versus man coverage more consistently. And I think Chris Olave is a more pure route runner to all 3 levels, short, intermediate, and deep, versus Rashid Shaheed, who's more of a deep threat kind of specialist. So personally, I would rather go and get Chris Olave than Rashid Shaheed. But if the Steelers traded for need for speed Shaheed here, I would not be sneezing at that at all right, it's another guy that can take the top off the defense. He's got great ball tracking ability. He can contribute on special teams as well, just like Calvin Austin III does. Can you make an argument that his skill set is pretty redundant with Calvin's? Yeah, you can, but he is slightly bigger than Calvin is. So, to get a wide receiver trio as fast as DK Metcalf, Rashid Shaheed, and Calvin Austin III, that's the type of stuff that can scare a defense shitless, to be completely frank with you guys. So, absolutely, I would be in on a Rashid Shaheed trade, especially for the right price. And keep in mind here, guys, that although these talks, if they actually happened, fizzled out during the bye week, that doesn't mean that something still can't happen down the road. Maybe the Saints right now still want to see if Spencer Rattler can get them a couple more wins and get them in position to maybe make a run down the stretch. Now, that's probably unlikely. They're going to have to, they're probably going to lose their next few games and they're going to be selling at the deadline, but maybe it's a little bit too early in the season for them to consider trading one of their receivers, but they're going to be more open to that as the deadline gets closer. And that's kind of what my message is to you guys. When you talk about Jakobi Meyers, when you talk about Chris Olave, when you talk about Rashid Shaheed, you talk about all these guys that could be traded to the Steelers before the deadline this year, the closer we get to the deadline, the more likely a deal ends up happening, all right? Because obviously deadlines make deals, and when you're still a month out from the deal having to be made, teams usually want to, take their time and, not, give up on their seasons as early as week 6. So some other realistic wide receiver targets to keep your eye on outside of Shaheed and Olave. Jakobi Meyers, I've mentioned him a couple times, would love to add him here. Calvin Ridley, if you're looking for another deep threat, he is very, very fast as well. Same thing with Hollywood Brown, who's a decent route runner and deep threat. Tyler Lockett is probably washed at this point, but he would be a one-year veteran kind of, Band-Aid option there. And then Dontayvion Wicks is probably the odd man out in Green Bay, especially with Christian Watson and Jaden Reed coming back to the lineup for Titletown here pretty soon. Wicks has a drop issue, but somebody that maybe the Steelers have a little bit of interest in. And listen, man, this is all assuming that the Pittsburgh Steelers are even looking for a wide receiver trade, all right? It doesn't sound like Calvin Austin III is going to be out for that long with the shoulder injury. And frankly, this is a Steelers offense that likes to play a lot of 12 personnel and 13 personnel, which of course means you've got either 2 or 1 receiver on the field at a time. So, they haven't really been running a lot of 11 personnel, and they do like Calvin. So unless the Steelers team is going to make a big switch to playing a lot of 3 receiver sets, I don't know if the Steelers necessarily feel the need to go out and get another wide receiver before the trade deadline. But like I said, it's possible that Pittsburgh likes where this room is at right now, because right now the 2 guys that are really true starters in this room are DK Metcalf and Calvin Austin III, who's obviously dealing with an injury right now. But then, as the backup options, I think they still like Roman Wilson as a backup option. That's why they didn't sign Odell Beckham Jr. or somebody else in free agency this over the last few weeks. They believe in Roman and Scotty Miller to fill that wide receiver 2 role, at least in the interim. They also like Ben Skoranek, and they got Isaiah Hodgins as well on the practice squad, who they seem to like a little bit as well. So I don't think that the Steelers necessarily may feel like they need to get a wide receiver because, like I said, they live in these jumbo 12 and 13 personnel packages. And really, you can make an argument you don't need 3 true starting level wide receivers on your team if that's the case. So I guess we'll see if the Steelers make any adjustments with their philosophy moving forward. I'm sure for the right price, they would probably go out and get another receiver if they can make that happen. But at this point, guys, don't be surprised if the Steelers don't trade for a big-name receiver. So predict it for me down there in the comment section. Will the Pittsburgh Steelers make a trade for a wide receiver before the NFL trade deadline? Give me a yes or no down there in the comment section for today's pinned question. In just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today. While I tell you about our sponsor, simply give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section. And with that, let's have word from our sponsor today at Ethos. And guys, the summary before I started here at Chat Sports, unfortunately, my family lost my late grandfather. And as you tend to do when you lose a loved one, you begin to think about your own mortality and what would happen to the people dependent on you if something were to happen. And with today's sponsor, Ethos, your family can be protected. Cassie and I are getting married soon, and shortly after that, I imagine we'll buy a house and start having some kids. If something were to happen to me, I want the last thing the people I love to worry about is being able to pay the bills. So I trust Ethos to keep them protected. As you probably already know, however, the process for obtaining life insurance can be super confusing or just straight up annoying with how tedious the process can be. That's where our friends at Ethos come in. As of March of 2025, Business Insider named Ethos the #1 no medical exam instant life insurance provider. Ethos is an online platform that makes getting life insurance fast and easy to protect your family's future in minutes, not months. There's no complicated process, and it's 100% online. There's no medical exam required, and you just answer a few health questions to get a quote in as little as 10 minutes. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos today. Get your free quote at ethos.com/NFL Daily. That's ethos.com/NFL Daily to get your free quote today. Application times may vary, rates may vary. A big thank you to Ethos for sponsoring today's edition of Steelers Talk. So now let's get to this rumor here, because this has certainly been circulating on Steelers Twitter. PFSN, which is a sports talk kind of platform there, has linked the Steelers as a potential trade partner for Dolphins running back De'Von Achane. All right, I was a little surprised when I saw this, but I actually saw this from Fins Extra on X yesterday, saying Kansas City Chiefs, Green Bay Packers, Los Angeles Chargers, and the Pittsburgh Steelers have all been named as potential landing spots for De'Von Achane, and then they source PFSN as the source for that. And people have been asking me over the last 24 hours what I think of that, and what I think of it is PFSN doesn't understand the Pittsburgh Steelers roster needs right now. The Steelers do not need to add another running back here this season, guys. They just don't, and I can almost guarantee you the Steelers feel the exact same way. And I take a look at the running back room, and maybe some people don't think Kenneth Gainwell is a legit number 2 running back. Maybe they feel like Caleb Johnson's a bust and he's going to be a non-factor this season. But like you ask the Pittsburgh Steelers, man, you got Jaylen Warren, who they believe is a top-flight running back in this league, which, by the way, the numbers bear that out. And then Kenneth Gainwell, who just put up almost 100 yards rushing as the backup running back here. Also, he catches passes out of the backfield, a really good third down back. And then, yes, they still believe in Caleb Johnson long-term and believe that he's going to have more and more opportunities as the season goes on. So the Steelers, out of all the teams in the league to link a running back to, I think the Steelers would be on the list of teams that absolutely probably would not be interested in trading for a running back at this point. And, I think Warren in particular continues to be underestimated. I mean, there's major radio hosts in Pittsburgh, or I won't name names, who are saying that Kenneth Gainwell should be the number 1 running back here in Pittsburgh, when Jaylen Warren, all he's done is make guys miss ever since he came out of Oklahoma State as an undrafted free agent. That has continued on into this year. Now, I want to show you this chart here. I want to credit Jake Tribby on X for bringing this to our attention here. It is a chart with missed tackles forced per touch juxtaposed with yards after contact per touch. And oh yeah, look who's in the top right there, beating out everybody by a wide margin. That is Jaylen Warren. And as much as I like Kenneth Gainwell in this offense, like as the number 2 running back, you can tell he doesn't even come close to Jaylen Warren in terms of making guys miss, in terms of having the contact balance, in terms of, making more out of a run than what his offensive line provides for him. So Jaylen Warren, and that's not all this that he brings to the table, man. He does that as a receiving back out of the backfield. He pass protects. He's one of the more complete running backs in the entire National Football League, and people continue to underestimate him. And I'm kind of sick and tired of it at this point, thinking we need to go get a De'Von Achane when we already have a number 1 running back here in Jaylen Warren. And then the supplementary guys are guys that I think the Steelers like right now. So, Achane is a good player, but am I giving up draft capital in next year's NFL draft to go get another running back here? Unless there's a major injury to Jaylen Warren, personally, I'm not considering it. But then there's another Miami Dolphin that is kind of circulating in trade rumors here. Jaylen Waddle. Jeremy Fowler from ESPN says that he would, quote-unquote, not be surprised if teams start calling about Jaylen Waddle. This is what Fowler had to say on ESPN earlier this week. He says league execs are already wondering which struggling teams could enter fire sale mode. In the AFC East, the Jets would have several attractive trade possibilities on the defensive side of the ball, as would the Dolphins on offense. It would not surprise me if teams start to call a Miami receiver, Jaylen Waddle, if the Dolphins continue to struggle. Now, my take on Jaylen Waddle and his potential availability via trade, guys, is, I think NFL fans tend to look at teams that are struggling, and then they think automatically because a team is struggling and they're losing football games that they're automatically selling every good player on their roster. And that's just not the case, all right? Like right now, Jaylen Waddle is only 26 years old, and he's under contract through 2028. He's a foundational building block for a potential rebuild that appears to be on the horizon there in Miami. So personally, guys, I would be shocked if the Miami Dolphins even consider taking calls on Jaylen Waddle this year. And Jeremy Fowler, he said also during this ESPN segment, he agrees with me. He says, I highly doubt Miami would entertain trading Jaylen Waddle at this point, especially with Tyreek Hill out for the season. And I completely agree with Fowler's kind of reasoning there. He's young, he's fast, he's very talented, and he's under contract through 2028. So it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for the Miami Dolphins to even consider trading him away. Usually, the guys that you want to look for are guys that either have, issues with the team, all right? The team wants to unload them because of personality issues or behavior issues or whatever. Or B, they're on a struggling team on a one-year deal, and the team is looking to get something out of them before they leave in free agency. Those are the guys that you look for. Jaylen doesn't really fit that mold because he's not a head case in Miami. He's somebody that's a consummate professional, and he's under contract for a number of seasons, and he's young. So the Dolphins don't really have any incentive to trade him away, even though they are heading toward a rebuild. So now we do have one more trade possibility to talk about on today's show, but before we get into that, make sure you click that thumbs up icon if you are enjoying today's show. If you're already subscribed to the channel, the best way you can help us out is to click that thumbs up icon on every Steelers Talk video you see, because the more people that like our videos, YouTube's going to recommend our videos to more Steelers fans. That gets new eyeballs on the channel, which leads to more subscribers, and so on and so forth. So if you want to help us grow, you want to help us make this the largest individually run Steelers news program like it already is. We're about to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel, guys. We got so many supporters. We really do appreciate your guys' support. So if you want to do me a favor today and click that thumbs up icon, I'd greatly appreciate you. So now let's talk about Chicago Bears former starting left tackle Braxton Jones, who is presumably available via trade for a late day 3 draft pick, because guess what? The Chicago Bears are benching him right now after, to try and give themselves a spark. They're starting Ozzie Trapilo, their second-round pick out of Boston College, who is the future at this position. And, it makes you think, could the Pittsburgh Steelers potentially trade for him to replace Broderick Jones as the starting left tackle of this team? Now, I think Broderick has been playing okay in certain moments this season, but he's certainly given up his fair share of quick pressures. I don't think that his technique in terms of his leverage is particularly well. He plays very upright in his stance when pass protecting, which leaves him super vulnerable to people with A, long arms with finesse moves, and then B, the bull rush. So he needs to play with better posture. I think that comes down to coaching and discipline. It's two things that Broderick unfortunately doesn't have here in Pittsburgh, at least to this point in his NFL journey. But Braxton Jones, man, he's been like a pretty decent starting left tackle for a number of seasons. He's only 26 years old. Obviously brings good size to the table there at over 300 pounds. He has 44 career NFL starts at left tackle over his 4-year career. A former 6th-round pick, and he's coming off an ankle injury that required surgery last year, and frankly, coming off of that surgery, he hasn't been able to move the same way. Braxton's been kind of known as a very athletic offensive tackle that can reach block and do a bunch of things to get to the second level for that Chicago Bears team, and he hasn't been able to do everything at the same level he used to this season, leading to his benching. And you can see it's affected his career. It's affected his PFF grade this year. So obviously PFF grading, it's not gospel whatsoever, but it's a good tool to take a look at kind of the trajectory of a player's career. And you guys can see here, a pretty darn good rookie season. He was top 20 in the league among offensive tackles in PFF grading. And again, last year, he was inside the top 25. But then this year, coming off that injury, he doesn't even crack the top 50. But could he theoretically, as he continues to get better off that ankle injury, continue to get better and better and get back to the place where he once was? He's only 26 years old. It's not like that injury could put as a high level of risk to be a long-term thing. And, if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, I would be willing to potentially give away a late day 3 pick, maybe a late day 3 pick swap. Now, I'm not selling the farm to get Braxton Jones, and who knows, Broderick Jones might continue to play better, and this team feels good about him for the rest of the season. But if we get closer to the trade deadline and Broderick still isn't playing well and he's given up a lot of pressures, and the Steelers want to have a little bit more consistency at that position, Braxton Jones is somebody where if you can get him for like a 6th-round pick, maybe a 6th and 7th-round pick swap there, that is something that I absolutely would entertain if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers. Some other offensive tackle trade targets to consider around the league. The thing about offensive tackles, guys, by the way, in terms of trading for them, there's usually not a lot of opportunities, all right? Because if you have a good offensive tackle, you don't really look to trade them, all right? So Rasheed Walker is probably my number one target outside of Braxton Jones because, like Jones, he's not super old. He's 25 years old. He's got a lot of experience as well. Jermaine Illuminor can play left or right tackle. The Giants might be going on a full-scale fire sale here soon. DJ Humphries is the swing tackle for Los Angeles right now. Could they think about letting him go for the right price? And then Andrew Wiley and Brandon Coleman with Sam Cosmi, their starting right guard, expected to be back in the lineup here very soon. Wiley and Coleman could be very expendable by the trade deadline. Again, I'm probably not willing to give up more than anything other than a day 3 pick for any of these guys. So that would be what I would offer for Braxton Jones, a 6th round pick, maybe. And if they're willing to do that and get a pick for a player that they have pretty much given up on at this point, I think that's a good deal for both sides. And hopefully Broderick can just continue to play better, so we don't even have to have this conversation as we get closer and closer to the trade deadline. And Broderick's our guy for the long-term future. But if he continues to struggle, Braxton Jones is definitely a name you should be monitoring. Now, make sure you guys let me know down there in the comment section. Would you accept this trade if you were Steelers GM Omar Khan? Give me an A for accept or D for decline. For me, if Broderick's not playing well and I can get Braxton Jones for a 6th round pick, I'm taking that every day of the week. All right, now make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already, because guess what, guys? These trade rumors, they're just getting started. There's going to be a ton of them over the next month as we get closer to the NFL trade deadline this year. We're going to have extensive trade rumors and targets coverage, as well as our breaking news coverage every time Steelers GM Omar Khan makes a move. So make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. We greatly appreciate all of your guys' support. And until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers.